Good evening, everyone. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Viaud, and thank you for joining us. We have a great show lined up for you this evening. For our main event, we are excited to be interviewing one of Convention of States' newest endorsers, the CEO of GoldCare.com, the founder of America's Frontline Doctors, an emergency room doctor for over 20 years, and the author of Selective Persecution, Dr. Gold. Really looking forward to sitting down and talking with her this evening. However, before we dive in to the program for tonight, I want to let y'all know that Article 5 Outfitters, the COS store, has extended their Black Friday sale through December 10th. So there is up to 75% off select items in the store, including t-shirts, polos, Oxfords, and more. To me, the steal right now is the GW jacket for men, which is 70% off. I love that jacket. A couple of years ago, it was given to us staff members as a gift at our retreat. And I wear it all the time during the winter. Yeah, even in Florida winters, it's a great jacket. So be sure to check that out. There's so many other items that are available as well for him, for her, keepsakes, you name it. It's just got a ton of great stuff. We love Article 5 Outfitters. So be sure to check out their store right now. Go to shopconventionofstates.com and shop for your favorite patriot today. Now, I usually start the show by giving you an introduction to Convention of States, telling you what we're all about. However, we recently decided that perhaps it would be better for you to hear that introduction from our activists. And tonight we have a great clip from Marty Benner, a volunteer on our Illinois team. Check it out.
Marty Benner from Illinois. Well, COS stands for Convention of States. It's a grassroots organization promoting the use of the Constitution to solve some of the problems we're facing in America. Did you know that we, the people, can propose amendments just like Congress can? Yes, we can. It says so in the Constitution in Article 5. 19 states out of the required 34 so far have passed the resolution to discuss term limits, a balanced budget, and the jurisdiction of the federal government. The amendments coming out of the COS will then go to the people for a vote, just like an amendment coming out of Congress. We know Congress will never fix itself. It's up to us to do it.
So well said, Marty. Thank you so much for that explanation. And yes, it really is up to we, the people, to fix the problem. And that really cuts to the heart of what it is that we're trying to accomplish with Convention of States. However, I want to take a minute to share our mission at COS because we are more than a convention. Our mission statement is to build the largest engaged army of self-governing grassroots activists in American history. Or the way I like to put it, reestablish a culture of self-governance. The founders built a system of governance that was dependent on an active and educated citizenry, but unfortunately, we Americans have allowed the comfort and distractions of everyday life to prevent us from doing our duty. Convention of States is focused on changing that, and we hope that you will join us. Now, usually at this part in the program, we kind of go into a couple other things as we wait for our guests to join us. But tonight, our guest was early, so we're going to go right ahead and dive into the interview segment of the program. And I have the great pleasure of welcoming to the program the CEO of GoldCare Health and Wellness, the founder of America's Frontline Doctors, the author of Selective Persecution, and one of COS's newest endorsers, Dr. Gold. Dr. Gold, it's a pleasure to have you with us. How are you this evening?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, I consider it an honor to have you with us. You are a hero to the Republic. Now, typically with first-time guests, I like to ask them to share their COS story. However, some in our audience may be a bit unfamiliar with your work. So if you don't mind, to start, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, how you first got into the medical field, and how, despite being in the medical field, you found yourself center stage in the political world?
Perfectly stated. Yes. And you might wonder, why is the doctor here on Convention of States? So I was a practicing emergency physician for 25 years. My father was a doctor, so I really like to say I was in medicine from birth onward. It was just in my blood. And I was on the front lines during COVID. And when our government, our federal government specifically, came out with a lot of government health policies that were just flat out wrong, absolutely wrong, and they were suppressing truthful information. That's what got me interested in jumping into public speaking. So starting in 2020, I started just speaking out on what I knew was true. Very obvious common things that in 2025 everyone acknowledges, right? Masks don't work to keep out tiny respiratory viruses. 6-foot social distancing was totally made up. By the way, if you missed it in January 24, Fauci under oath in Congress admitted that there was no science, no reason behind saying 6-foot social distancing. So they also said that easy, common, cheap, safe drugs over the generic drugs like hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin were unsafe. And then, of course, they started pushing a new experimental medication on people. And all of these things were so horrifying to honorable ethical physicians that we started to speak out. And some of you may remember in the summer of 2020, there were a bunch of doctors standing on the steps of the Supreme Court in their white coats like I'm wearing tonight. And we stood there and we told America and we told the world the truth, which is not to be afraid of medical fear mongering is what was going on. And it was causing us as a nation to willingly, voluntarily give up our constitutional rights. I should have started with I'm also a lawyer, which I'll get to in a minute. I'm a doctor and a lawyer. So I was very alarmed at the loss of our constitutional freedoms. We have a right to assemble. We have a right to free speech. Obviously, we have a right to go to church. We have a right to petition our government against grievances. All of those things were they just had evaporated, overnight. And I was very, very alarmed at that. And so we doctors stood up and we spoke out. And so from the summer of 2020 onward, I see my role as an educator in the medical space, teaching people really the truth about the medical system and really about their own health, so that never again will the American people be held hostage to inaccurate medical fear.
That is so well said. And you are formidable being a doctor and a lawyer, which is incredible. But you mentioned America's frontline doctors speaking out early in 2020 against the COVID lockdowns, decisions being made by Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, the coronavirus task force. I'm curious, though, what specifically did you pick up on early in 2020 that made you and other doctors come together and decide to speak out against what was happening?
The lies were so severe. They were so severe that the thing that people who are dishonest do wrong is they tend to do too much. They tend to make the lie too big. If people had, on the other side, had just said things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin don't work, maybe we doctors wouldn't have been so activated. But they went further than that, and they said things like these drugs weren't safe. Now, these were FDA-approved drugs for decades. There's no chance they weren't safe. Or maybe if they hadn't reached for the 6-foot social distancing lie, which meant that schools had to close because most schools didn't have a large enough footprint to keep the schools open and yet have 6 feet between children, maybe then parents wouldn't have gotten so upset, if life had just gone on as normal. But the lies were so big that I felt I had to speak out. And because you asked, I will share with you that it was also a very specific moment where in front of me, there was a patient who needed medicine. I remember her well. She was a 52-year-old woman and she had positive COVID test. It was finally when we got the COVID test available to us, but she wasn't that sick. So I prescribed her medicine to take at home. It happened to be hydroxychloroquine. And I was delighted because I knew she would do well. I called her 2 days later. She was practically cured. She was basically cured. And then the third day, I got a phone call from my hospital threatening to fire me. And I remember being utterly shocked. First of all, nobody ever calls an ER doctor to talk about a particular one patient encounter. It was just so odd. And I remember thinking, why are you getting involved in one patient encounter? It was very odd. And do you think that I should just not help a patient in front of me? That was reason number one. Reason number two is a little bit more political, but medical. And this also plays into Convention of States. So we doctors, and I was in California at the time, we all got a letter from the California Medical Board. So that's an executive branch agency under the governor, saying that we could lose our physician license if we prescribed hydroxychloroquine. And I remember as a lawyer being offended and angry about this because I know for certain that a government bureaucrat is not allowed to tell me as a licensed physician what I can or can't prescribe. It's utterly against the rules, the regulations. So I was horrified that we doctors were being put into a box. And I asked my other peers what they felt about this, and most of them really just didn't care. They kind of shrugged their shoulders. Those two things really activated me. On the one hand, patients actually needing help, and we were being told not to help them. Remember when they said, if you're not that sick, just go home, and when you turn blue, go to the ER? Yeah, I remember that. That was offensive to me. And on the other hand, all of a sudden, the government was interfering with my ability to practice medicine, something I'd never seen in my entire life. Those are the two reasons I started speaking out.
And we're so grateful that you did. It really is astonishing to consider just how damaging the COVID shutdowns and the masking tyranny and now the COVID vaccines have been to our country. Even though we're nearly 6 years out from when this all began. Actually, I think I read just not too long ago, patient zero in China was reported. I think it was about 6 years ago at this time. But it is just astonishing to think about all of this damage. And, in a lot of ways, we're going to be reaping the ill effects of this for many years to come. Just recently, the FDA confirmed that 10 children died after taking the mRNA vaccine during trials. And that's just the 10 that they are admitting to. And what I found astonishing about that in particular, not only the fact that 10 children died during this, but it brought me back to when my wife and I were having a conversation many years ago before the vaccine was even created. I mentioned to Dr. Gold before the webinar got started here that my wife is a nurse, and we were having a conversation about what they were doing. Operation Warp Speed had been announced, and we had decided then that we weren't going to get any type of vaccine that was created because we were concerned about the long-term effects that could happen. We had no idea that we were going to be dealing with such immediate impacts from these experimental drugs. And it just seems like for so many Americans, after what happened in 2020, the trust that they had in our institutions was likely irrevocably broken. And so my question for you, Dr. Gold, is do you believe we will ever see the accountability and the justice necessary for our country to fully heal from that time period?
You do have to see people seek forgiveness, which means they acknowledge the errors and they seek forgiveness. And we've seen no signs of that. So I am not optimistic about seeing a change, especially on the side of the institutions that are benefiting from the status quo. And I would say those are the hospitals and the medical groups, the large medical cartels like the state medical boards. However, I'm actually super optimistic. Like Convention of States, Americans are very industrious, creative people, and we can create other solutions. We don't have to look to the federal government and the institutions that exist. We can create other better solutions that will compete in the marketplace, and lots of people will come to those solutions. So I've built one with GoldCare. There's others in other industries. I always like to mention, for example, Old Glory Bank in the banking space, GoldCare in the medical space, Public Square. There's all these options that are going to come up and rise up, and it's everybody's responsibility to start spending their money at places like that, so that in that way it won't so much matter what the people who did wrong did. Yes, it's terrible, but I don't think they're going to be apologizing anytime soon, sadly. Although, something, I do want to mention that the fact that the auto pen, that the president made a decision about that, gives me hope that Fauci will be arrested. And then, you know what? I'll come back and I'll do another show with you because that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great conversation. Honestly, that was the first thing I thought of too when he said that he was reversing or making all of the auto pen decisions null and void. I thought to myself, first and foremost, let's go after Fauci for crimes against humanity. So yeah, that would be amazing. A Patriot Mobile, I think, is another thing that where we're seeing these conservative alternatives that are out there for people that care about liberty. But you're talking a lot about what are some potential solutions to the problems that we have, and I think many of the woes in our healthcare system can be traced directly back to Christmas Eve of 2009, when Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Republicans had an opportunity in 2017 to repeal this horrific piece of legislation, but they failed to do so. Recently, President Trump proposed sending resources for Obamacare consumers directly to them so they may shop for their own health insurance instead of being assigned insurance by the government. What do you think of President Trump's proposal, and do you think there are any better ways to address the problems caused by Obamacare?
Right. My perspective is like a very macro perspective. I see it that we give a lot of money to the government and then we get very, very little back. So I'm always in favor of the worker keeping maximum amount of money and making the smart decisions that they want to make for themselves. That's what I'm in favor of. So every step that any politician takes towards that, I'm a huge fan of. So of course, the money should follow the person. The person should be able to make the decision. Same as in the school system, the money should follow the kid. And then the parents will find the best school for the kid. So 100%. And I just want to share with you, because you mentioned Obama, I would say that's when I first started paying a little bit more attention to politics. I've always voted all of my life. Absolutely, you have to be a good citizen and vote. But I remember the summer of 2008 very, very well. And I was horrified by Obama, absolutely horrified. I thought he was just, I don't want to even say on the air how little I thought of this person. And much of it had to do with his plans for socialized medicine. It was so clear to me that it was going to be a disaster. And this has like ushered in essentially socialism, it's been 15 years, and healthcare is 20% of our GDP. Think about that. 20% of our gross domestic product is in the healthcare space. That dominates our national dialogue on anything to do with budget and money. So he essentially socialized it. That's the truth. That's what Obamacare did. And it's making us, it's very hard to pull back from socialism, and it's essentially socialized our healthcare system. So any step President Trump can take to pull us away from that socialized system, hugely helpful.
And I think, well, let me ask, as a physician, what did that do to you in your practice by socializing medicine? Could you explain to our audience exactly the type of impacts you felt?
I'm going to say something you probably haven't heard and you probably don't expect me to say. So in my particular field of emergency medicine, it's almost like they bought the doctors. Emergency physicians were, as a group, was in favor of Obamacare, which I found horrifying. The reason is a lot of emergency patients' care was unpaid, completely unpaid, because people would come in who had no insurance at all. So they said to the emergency doctors, well, at least you'll get something, right? And it was true, actually. As a group, emergency physicians ended up getting paid. The groups, not the doctors really, but the groups would end up getting more because everyone who came in had some form of insurance. It was Medicaid, Medi-Cal in California, Medicaid. So I look back on that and I said, oh, that's how they bought out the doctors. They got the doctors to be silent and they got the doctors to follow like sheep. So the doctors, example in my specialty, ended up actually taking a little bit more money. And they kind of silenced the doctors, and the doctors sort of became widgets in the machinery. What it did for patients was terrible. So the patients would come into the ER, and I have to speak from my perspective of the ER, and everyone now technically had a doctor, whereas before Obamacare, they didn't have a doctor. They had nothing. So now everyone had a doctor, but those patients could never actually access their doctor. That was the dirty little secret. They had a doctor listed on their card, but I'd be the one in the ER having to call their doctor. You never could reach the doctor, which just wasn't a thing. I mean, it was such a scam, from top to bottom. It was such a scam. When you look at the data on health policy, costs went up and services went down. I mean, it was a scam from top to bottom. Less access, everything worse. You're old enough to remember the commercials. Remember when Obama said you get to keep your doctor? Well, that was a lie. The whole bit was a lie. The prices went up, services went down, access got worse, if you can believe that it actually got worse. I mean, it was a terrible thing. What we need always in every area of life, the person who wants the thing needs to control the purchase of the thing. If you want a car, you need to have the money and buy the car because you're very invested in it. as soon as you have somebody else making the purchasing decision, everything goes haywire. That's what's happened to our healthcare system. It's very heavily invested and controlled by people who don't actually care about the outcome, the health outcome, let's say. So it's a very bad system. It's completely federalized. And sometimes I like to say it's terrible and it's expensive. It's not just terrible and it's not just expensive. It's terrible and expensive. When I told you a moment ago that the 20% of our GDP is in the health industries, do you know other wealthy nations, the average amount of GDP that a nation spends on health is 8% for wealthy nations. And the highest nation, except for ours, is 12%. We're spending 20% of our GDP on health expenses. What are we getting for it? Are we getting longer lives? Are we getting healthier bodies? Are we getting better mental health? It'd be one thing if you're spending double and, you're having double life expectancy and double health and, everyone's happy and smiling, but we're actually not as healthy and we're spending double other nations. What is that?
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy is what it is. And I appreciate you. And I clumsily said your practice, but no, I very much appreciate your perspective as an emergency room doctor, because I wasn't even necessarily thinking about what the impact would be to emergency room patients. But yeah, every facet of our healthcare system has deteriorated after the Affordable Care Act, which has not made healthcare any more affordable and certainly not any better. I'm curious, though, Dr. Gold, if you could grade for us how you think the current administration has done in advancing medical freedom and transparency.
So I do get asked this a lot. I think we all want more than we're seeing. I want to start with, though, that I think that Big Pharma runs the federal government, and also big insurance interests run the federal government more than the other way around. So Bobby Kennedy, for example, really has his hands full. So I want to force people to remember the victories. We've had a lot of victories. This time last year, it was still the law of the land that, it's okay to chop off children's body parts if they think that they're confused about what sex they are, right? So that is pretty much going into the trash bin of history. I just want to remind people that there have been some serious victories. The FDA acknowledging that the shots killed kids. For you, for me, this is not news. I've known this for 4.5 years. Of course we knew it. The first studies came out in February of 2021, especially young boys and young men. But the fact that our federal government has admitted it is a big change. The fact that when that news flash came out, when the FDA acknowledged the death in the children, that article also said that they're going to be looking at the flu vaccine. So that story got a little bit buried because it was taken over by the COVID and the children's policy. But the flu story was actually a really big story. We all know as doctors, the flu shots don't work. Okay. But what we didn't really know publicly was that it actually raised your chances of getting flu. So now the FDA has said, we're actually gonna have to look at hard data and we're gonna see if this thing really works. So these are genuine victories. Now, the machinery of the healthcare system, best I can tell, hasn't really changed, right? Because the machinery is run by the money and, it's very difficult to change it. We had very, I would say, socialist leaders since the 60s, essentially, moving the financial decisions over health into the government's control. And it's really difficult to take it back. So I think the machinery of changing how healthcare is delivered in this country is quite difficult. So what I focus on, and I urge everyone else to focus on, is simply their own health, their own care. You can't really change the whole system. It's certainly not as individuals or even as, groups of individuals, but you can do much, much better for yourself. And that's what I'm excited about. We don't yet live in a totalitarian society where you can't actually make your own decisions. You actually can. Most people don't know where to turn to make better decisions. But once you pay attention to that, you can make good decisions, even with the current system.
That's so, it's an excellent point. And I think a lot of people who are expecting a lot more out of this administration are getting frustrated because things aren't happening as quickly as we would all like to see. It's important to remember, where were we a year ago, right? And I think you made a great point by saying that, because even the conversation we were just having about, the potential of bringing justice to Dr. Fauci, that wasn't even close to being a reality a year ago. And so I think these things, as you mentioned, take time. And I think we just need to have a little bit of patience and a little bit of grace. I'm curious, though, you told me before the program started, you've known about Article 5 and Convention of States even before everything fell apart in 2020. I'm very curious, how do you believe an Article 5 convention could solve the problems of our healthcare system?
How you solve most problems, especially economic problems, is competition, right? That's the answer, right? If you have a restaurant in your town, you live in a small town, there's only one restaurant, right? It's going to be the quality that owner determines. And he doesn't have much competition. So it might be good, it might not be good. It just sort of depends. But all of a sudden you put in a second restaurant in that same town, and you know what? Quality of both is going to go up. It's like self-evident, right? So we need competition. Well, the same thing is true in politics and policies. We need 50 states that can do things independently, not have so much federal oversight. It was never the reason why our states agreed to be, a United States of America. We came in as 50, one by one, sovereign states. And slowly over time, we've all been subsumed under very huge federal government. That's not the intention of our Constitution. And also, it's not good for us. We want more competition on everything. So when I look at the Convention of States, not even from a political perspective, but just from a practical perspective, you just said that you moved from New Jersey during COVID. I moved from California. I am so glad that there was another state to move to that had different policies that gave me an option to live in a more free area. I want the same thing in all areas. And the way to get that is to make sure the states have much stronger rights than they have now.
Perfectly said. And yes, if we're able to get in there and address that federal overreach, bring the power back to the states where they should be the ones deciding on some of the more important issues that we face as a society, not the federal government. That's not how it was designed.
Yeah, let the states compete, right?
Yes.
So why is Florida have more people moving in and California has more people moving out, right? So that's what I want. I want that freedom for people to decide what's best. And the Convention of States, from my perspective, offers that option to Americans. It's saying, listen, let each state, be its own, not have so much federal regulation and oversight and control. I mean, the Department of Education is a good example. Education belongs to the states. Why do we have a federal Department of Education? It might surprise people to know that the Department of Education only came about in our lifetime. It only came about due to Jimmy Carter. Like, it's quite new. So things like that, where our states are being beholden to the federal government, bad idea. And it's not the reason why our nation got together initially. And it's not good for Americans not to have competition. Competition is healthy, leads to better results.
Amen. So the last question I have for you tonight, Dr. Gold, while we encourage all of our supporters to become more active, join our state teams, help us to get to the necessary 34 states for calling a convention, what are some other ways people can take action right now in their own state to fight for medical freedom? You mentioned before focusing on your individual healthcare. So what are some things that you would recommend to our audience to do right now?
I mean, I'll give you the two that I am most familiar with. So I founded America's Frontline Doctors, and we do unbelievable policy work that helps everybody. Right now, we're focusing on making sure that physician-free speech is not infringed upon, making sure that parental rights, that certain states, Colorado is one of them, for example, that has just completely squelched parental rights over their children. So we fight those battles. So if you're really interested in medical freedom, there's no better organization than America's Frontline Doctors. I urge you to come to aflds.org, and just check us out. We have tons of information. And on the other side is Gold Care, which is exactly where you're going to find those physicians who are honorable, who work for you, unbiased, truthful information, classes, education, seminars, webinars, so that never again will you risk not knowing what you need to know when people are trying to tell you something that maybe isn't true. So those are things you can do. And as a separate matter, I just want to say that you have an obligation to be a good citizen. So you have to pick something. Like, it's not enough just to vote. which is the bare minimum what a good citizen needs to do, you have to do something for our society, something for our country. So volunteer for, Convention of States, America's Frontline Doctors, any one of, tremendous organizations, but consider deep in your heart, you're living in an amazing country and you should donate something, donate money or donate time. I'm sure Jonathan, Convention of States could use, more volunteers. I know Frontline Doctors could use more volunteers. And I'm just putting that little thought in people's heads. You have to do something to pay back for this beautiful country that we live in.
Yes, absolutely. We live in a beautiful country and we need to be engaged and do our part in order to preserve that liberty for posterity. Dr. Gold, I know you are a busy woman and we are so thankful and blessed that you were able to join us this evening. I just want to wish you and your family a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a happy and blessed New Year. Thank you for being such an important voice for us in our country and all of your courage in speaking out against the federal tyranny. We're so grateful to have your support with Convention of States.
Thank you so much. Godspeed to getting to 34.
Thank you. God bless. Wow, that was incredible. I really, really enjoyed that conversation. And there's so many ways that we can impact our economy and our way of life by having this Article 5 convention. And I think a lot of times we don't think about healthcare, but that is something that we could address. We can get rid of health and human services and get the federal government out of our healthcare. That's the way to do it, is really through an Article 5 convention. As we just talked about with Obamacare, the federal government did not want to address it. They didn't do it. Republicans had an opportunity in 2017 to get rid of this. They didn't do it. We have a chance to really fix that, get the federal government out of healthcare by having an Article 5 convention. So join us, conventionofstates.com/act. Sign up and become an activist today. All right, let's go ahead and move to 5 for 5. All right, so one of the more underrated ways to demonstrate that Article 5's amendment process is legitimate is to review litigation about Article 5. Yes, our judicial system has weighed in on Article 5 in multiple court cases, and so tonight we wanted to share some great clips from COS University's Gov 300 course so that this way you can learn a little bit about that. Tonight we have none other than COS co-founder and senior advisor Michael Farris to talk a little bit more.
This is a situation that we're facing in Kansas right now, because the Kansas Constitution has the identical provision that was litigated in this Illinois case in 1975. The Illinois Constitution requires a 2/3 majority vote of both houses of the legislature as does the Kansas Constitution, on constitutional amendments of all kinds: state constitutional amendments, federal constitutional amendments. And state constitutional proposals under an Article 5 application, like Convention of States application, that would count, and that. So Dyer versus Blair ruled that state constitutions cannot be applied, because again, state constitutions cannot control. So this is a particular application of the broader rule. State constitutions are inapplicable, but they're inapplicable as to supermajority requirements. Now, this federal district court also ruled that the Illinois legislature could self-impose. So basically, the legislature in its own internal rules can adopt whatever voting rules they want. If they want simple majority vote, they can do that. If they want a simple majority of a quorum, they can do that. If they want a simple majority of the entire body, they can do that. But it's a difference between being imposed by the people through a state constitutional amendment versus imposed by the legislature itself. So the state legislatures are free to adopt their own rules. And so if a legislature wants to self-impose a 2/3 majority requirement, they could. We hope that there's going to be a federal court ruling soon that will make it clear that the Kansas Constitution suffers the same fate as the Illinois Constitution, and that it's unconstitutional. And now, this federal district court was under an old system that was abandoned a couple, 3 years after I became a lawyer. I became a lawyer in 1976 when I was 7, and or something like that. And so but there used to be, most constitutional litigation could be heard by a 3-judge federal panel in the federal district courts. And this was one of those 3-judge federal panels. And it was Circuit Justice Stevens who became Circuit Judge Stevens, who became Justice Stevens of the Supreme Court. And future Justice Stevens wrote the opinion in Dyer versus Blair. So it comes with a quasi-Supreme Court aura about it because of the authorship of Justice Stevens, the future Justice Stevens, in writing that opinion. So it gets a little extra punch in its authority. Although technically there's no difference, but nonetheless. Okay, this is the term limit cases that I talked about. States may not use instructions, ballot disclosures, etc., to indirectly violate the rule that state process cannot be used in Article 5 litigation. And I've given you 4 examples of these kinds of cases. And you can find at least that many more, probably 12. I lost track. A lot of cases litigated this same point, and all around the term limit issue. It was settled a long time ago, before Marbury versus Madison, that the president had no role in Article 5. Hollingsworth versus Virginia settled that 1798. And a while later, basically what amounts to an aside, the Supreme Court said, and neither do governors. So it's clear that it's the legislative branch alone, Congress acting alone in their authority, states acting, legislatures acting alone in their authority. The executives of neither branch are applicable.
Such great stuff there from the great Michael Farris, and we're so thankful for him to have given that presentation and for us to now have that available on COS University. But I encourage you, check out some of the court cases that have been made available or that have taken place, because it really bolsters our case and really shows that the fear mongering that's done by our opposition doesn't hold water. So you can check out the Article 5 Information Center for more information. Of course, you can go to our website as well. There's a particular article I would recommend. It's called Conventional Disinformation, that outlines some of the court cases. And of course, there's also The Law of Article 5, the book written by Professor Robert Nadelson that also has a lot of these court cases in it as well, if you'd like to dive in and get some more information. Okay. Let's hear about the latest news from across the country by turning to Jake Fay with COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
On November 13th, over a dozen patriots representing Convention of States, Massachusetts, stood before the Massachusetts Joint Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs to deliver powerful testimony in support of H.3 888.
The only way that we will actually in America be able to see our future is if we have fiscal responsibility, because our people cannot afford any more taxes. The insurances are doubling, the taxes are going up, hundreds of dollars a month every year on Americans. The people do not have any more money.
The Massachusetts team is certainly gaining ground in the state, having passed out of committee the past 2 years, which may explain why the opposition pulled out the big guns. A grand total of 6 paid lobbyists for well-funded groups tied to George Soros showed up at the hearing in order to testify against COS. Fortunately, the team was more than prepared, and Mark Meckler tuned in virtually to respond.
I've been amazed during this hearing to sit here and hear your fellow citizens in the room there called radical, far right, outrageous, all kinds of name calling against their fellow citizens, people who just believe that the federal government should live within its means, that people shouldn't serve in Washington, D.C. for 40 or 50 years on the people's dime. People who believe things that the vast majority of Americans believe. By the way, term limits an 85% issue. Balanced budget an 85% issue. These are not radical ideas. These are not fringe ideas. These are not far right or outrageous ideas. The people who are in this room of good faith because they're worried about the state of our country.
The vote is expected to be held at a later date. Fortunately, the government shutdown is now over, but a longtime columnist Cal Thomas has authored an op-ed encouraging support for a second American revolution to address concerns exposed in Congress during the last shutdown.
One grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for a convention of states reports that 19 state legislatures have passed resolutions calling for a convention. Members of the House and Senate are not going to voluntarily relinquish their powers and perks. They're like a child with tooth decay who needs to have candy withheld from him. So too must the candy of spending and debt be removed from the hands of politicians before the country decays beyond repair.
Thomas's op-ed appeared in the Washington Times and hundreds of other publications across the nation. And now it's time for the final five. Number 1, COS continues to grab headlines across the country, including coverage of a court victory which overturned a provision of the Kansas Constitution. Number 2, COS President Mark Meckler took to his Sunday night battle cry broadcast to make an exciting announcement.
I took a position as the CEO of Just the Network. Just the Network is a holding company, an umbrella company for Just the News. This is John Solomon's news organization. John's my partner in this operation. We're going to be acquiring some other companies. We announced already that we acquired the Post Millennial and Human Events. We're going to be rolling them into an entity, be able to cross promote. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to be really clear. I'm still the president of Convention of States. I'm still doing what I do. You're still going to see me here on Sunday nights. It just gives us as an organization the opportunity for more exposure.
Number 3, the Hawaii team reports a special event with Patriot Academy's Rick Green, and they also spread the word about Article 5 by participating in a Lions Club Veterans Day Parade. Number 4, here are a few of my favorite photos sent in from Convention of States patriots across the country. And number 5, I'm wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for all you've done for COS. We truly could not do it without you, and we greatly appreciate your service to the mission.
I love COS Now. I love seeing all of the amazing activism that's going on across our nation. Congratulations to the Massachusetts team. I think Mark actually said it was one of the best, or if not the best, team testifying testimony. That's the word I was looking for. Forgive me. That was given by a team for Convention of States. So really well done to the Massachusetts team. Other state teams, we're going to have to step up our game when we're going out there because Massachusetts really set the bar pretty high for us. So well done to them. We have not heard of a vote just yet, but we're hopeful to get through committee. Like Jake said, we have done that the last couple of years. And then some other great victories as well. Of course, what happened in Kansas, we're really, really excited about that provision in their state constitution being struck down, which means that no longer will Article 5 resolutions be required to have a 2/3 majority in the House and in the Senate. We're already through the Senate there. We just need to get through the House, and we expect that to happen early on in 2026. So we're really excited about that. And I actually was speaking with the regional director, Deanna Beckett. We're already through committee there in the House. I had forgotten that. All we need is a floor vote there in the House, and we're excited about that opportunity to have Kansas become state number 20. They should have been state number 20 a couple years ago if it hadn't been for that rule, but we're glad that they are perched and ready to go to become state number 20 at the beginning of 2026. Lots of great activity going on across the nation. Thank you to all of our amazing grassroots activists. And if you have not gotten involved, now's the time. Sign up, become an activist, join us, be a part of the movement. We would be grateful to have you. Okay, let's go ahead and move now to action at home. Okay. I'll be honest with you. This one is a little bit of a challenge for me personally. Okay. I know it's hard to ask for donations, particularly during the Christmas season. You may even have a daughter that's turning 6 years old on Monday and a birthday party that you're planning for this coming weekend. Or maybe that's just me. But I know that it's difficult, particularly because even though we have President Trump doing everything he can to fix our economy, we still are feeling some of the pressures from the Biden economy that took place and during the last administration. However, we also know that at the end of the year, many people are considering end of year giving. Yesterday was Giving Tuesday. And so we humbly ask that you please consider a convention of states when you are planning your year-end giving. Right now, we also have an opportunity for your donation to go even further. As I mentioned, Giving Tuesday was yesterday. Well, it was extended into today for Convention of States, and any donation made before midnight tonight will be tripled. And monthly donations in particular will be tripled for the first 6 months of giving. Okay, this is a huge opportunity, and that means when you give today, you'll have triple the impact in the fight to call the nation's first Article 5 convention. It's an exciting opportunity. I know it can be a challenge, but if you don't have the time to donate, to dedicate to Convention of States, we would be humbly grateful, extremely grateful for you to donate some of your resources to us and help us in trying to save our nation and really make a difference across the country. So please consider giving today before midnight by visiting conventionofstates.com/give 2025. And we thank you so very much for all of your continued support. Okay, let's go ahead and check the Minutemen Mailbag. All right, so this month for the Minutemen Mailbag, we asked all of you the same question we asked Dr. Gold earlier, which is, what do you think of President Trump's proposal to send Obamacare dollars directly to consumers? Do you have another idea for helping to lower healthcare costs? I thought it was a great question. It really is an important topic, which again is why I was so excited that we were having Dr. Gold join us tonight. But unfortunately, we only got one response. What happened? I don't know. But we are very grateful to Marianne Whitesell, who wrote in, and Marianne said, I think producer G is going to put it on the screen there. Thank you, sir. At the very least, make all premiums and out-of-pocket costs tax deductible. I think that would be a huge change. And I agree with you, Marianne. So thank you so much for writing in and adding that. I have one other suggestion that I'll make since many of you didn't want to write in. And I actually had written this down and thought about this before Dr. Gold. And I think a lot of what she was saying goes in line with what I would suggest. And that was, instead of health insurance being provided to people through their employer, let's create an open marketplace where people may shop for healthcare on their own, just like they do for homeowners insurance, car insurance. That's where we get that competition that Dr. Gold was talking about earlier. And by keeping rates competitive, it will be better for the consumer. You just won't see, and I think right now with the way it's set up and for your employers taking care of it, it's just many people think of it as an arbitrary number that's lumped in with some other deductions that comes out of your paycheck. But if you're thinking about it as a bill, as you would your monthly bill for your car insurance or for your homeowner's insurance, you can even maybe potentially bundle with other companies for health insurance. I don't know if that would work, but maybe you're going to be treating it a lot differently than how you're treating it right now. And so I think even though it may be a minor change in the grand scheme of things, I do think that it would have a huge impact. But that's just my 2 cents. However, we'd love to get your 2 cents. So please, in the future, check out conventionofstates.com/mailbag for our question. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from many of you in response to this, so we can share your answers on the program and have a little bit of a commentary. And it's for you, so we would love for you to do that. Wow, I'm looking at the time, and I can't believe we've flown through the program tonight. But just a reminder, all of the COS at Home shows are aired live on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The next show, the first of the new year, will be on Wednesday, January 7th, 2026 at 8 p.m. Eastern. And my guest will be the newest endorser of Convention of States, best-selling author, speaker, and host of the Heidi St. John podcast, Heidi St. John. And if you aren't familiar with Heidi St. John's work, you will not want to miss this program. She is an incredible culture warrior, and we are excited to have her endorsement and having us joining the program. So I hope that you will join us on Wednesday, January 7th. Heidi St. John also ran for Congress, too, in Deep Blue, Oregon. So I'll be really looking forward to hearing from her about that experience as well. All we need is you. So join us Wednesday, January 7th. At 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central Time for COS at Home. So, ladies and gentlemen, as always, this has been a ton of fun. I love having the opportunity to talk directly with all of you about some of the most important issues and talking with some incredible guests about why they support Article 5 and Convention of States. I hope you've enjoyed the program, and I also hope that it was helpful to you. Thanks again to Dr. Gold for joining us tonight. A big thanks, as always, to the legend Producer G for all of the hard work he does behind the scenes. And look, putting up with me is not easy, so thank you so much to Producer G. But the greatest thanks of all, as always, goes to each and every one of you in our grassroots army, our grassroots supporters. We're so thankful for all of you. And it's important to remember that despite all of the problems we currently face in our country, you and I, we the people, right at the top of the Constitution, it says we the people, we are the solution to these problems. So thank you again. Now, in honor of Christmas, to close out tonight's call, I'd like to take a minute to read from the second chapter of the Gospel of Luke in the King James Version. So I hope that you will indulge me for this as we prepare for the Christmas season. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And that's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown. Thank you all so much for being with us. I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a happy and blessed New Year. We're so grateful for all of you. Enjoy the season of Christmas, and remember the reason for the season. Enjoy the time with your family and friends this holiday season. Thank you for all of your support of Convention of States. We look forward to seeing you in 2026 and beyond. God bless you, and good night.